because education is the DNA of our society, and people tend to overlook this, but how we're going to live as adults and how we're going to raise our children to adulthood are systemically linked, and the same structures that are driving our economy are driving our school system right now. So there are amazing innovations that are taking place all over the world. People are bringing so much creativity to creating new models for learning, but there are a few structural features that are common to many of these different initiatives, and so that they are challenging or questioning or just walking away from some of the structures that underlie institutional schooling. And I want to really emphasize here that I'm talking about the structures of institutional schooling. I'm not attacking teachers who, the ones that I know, are dedicated, caring, intelligent, wonderful people who are struggling within the confines of this system as much as children are. So the first feature is standardization, is the idea that it would be a good idea for everyone to meet one standard. So many commenters have remarked that, our schools were designed during the early industrial period, and they are intentionally created on a factory model, and the idea that you can feed diverse children into this system and produce a standardized product. The second feature is hierarchy or ranking, which of course is reflected in our economy. So it is extremely well documented that grades and test scores correlate better with family income than with any other factor. And so we are viewing education as though it's a vehicle for creating equality, but it's really not. Even the World Bank acknowledges that schools as they now exist maintain or intensify the current level of economic inequality in a society by consistently labeling poor children as less intelligent than rich children. So the third structural feature is the idea of hierarchical, top-down, centralized control. And again, I hope you see how this is reflected in the economic issues we're talking about this weekend. So what has happened is that a deeply democratic idea, the free and equal education of every child, has become wedded to a deeply anti-democratic idea, which is that this education is going to be controlled in minute detail from the top down by this kind of centralized authority structure. So the crucial confusion that we have in our society is between the idea of publicly supported education and the idea of centrally controlled education. So if you want to really get your hands around this, take the word school in the following sentences and replace it with the word radio and say, okay, I'm in favor of publicly supported, community-supported radio, right? I'm in favor of centrally controlled, state-administered radio. So, these are not the same thing, and this has really important ramifications in our education system. So, and I want to point out again, none of these structural features of the institution of schooling are in any way intrinsic to learning. And, in fact, somebody was asking me about literacy before. The U.S. population in the Northeast was 95 to 98% literate before we had compulsory schooling, and in the southern states the numbers were a little lower. Wherever there's more poverty, the literacy numbers are going to be lower. But when people have a need to be literate, they will become literate through many, many different mechanisms, many different information sharing strategies. So, this is not something that needs to be controlled from on high. But I also just want to talk about something that is deeper, that underlies all of these structural features. And again, it just totally resonates with everything Judy was just saying, because it has to do with the way we're viewing the world, the way we're viewing nature, the way we're viewing our children. There's sort of an interesting thing. An author named Ian McGilchrist has written this really brilliant and powerful argument that what has happened over the past several hundred years in modern Western society is this increasing dominance in a way of thinking that is sort of characteristic of the left hemisphere of the brain. And, this is not there was the old 1980s version of this where the left brain is verbal and the right brain is spatial or artistic, and it's sort of gone beyond that now. But the difference that they're finding is not so much in what they do as in how they do it. The left brain is narrowly focused. It prefers the analytical, the disconnected, the mechanical, the non-living. It creates elaborate systems and manipulates those systems, but it doesn't see beyond its representations of the world, its representations of the world, to the world as it actually exists. So the left brain does not see when the emperor has no clothes. So the right brain is the part of us that sees that the emperor is buck naked, because the right brain is grounded in experience, sensation. It is where compassion and empathy are rooted. It is where our sense of beauty and the sacred are rooted. The right brain sees everything as interconnected. It sees everything in relationship. So the left brain is seeing the world in what Martin Buber called the I-it relationship. And the right brain is seeing the world in the I-thou relationship. So, the left brain serves an important function. If you want to build a bicycle or a solar panel, it's your go-to hemisphere. But the right brain, evolutionarily, McGilchrist is arguing, is meant to be primary. So the left brain is a powerful, powerful tool, but the right brain is meant to be in charge. And what he's saying is that through a series of historical and cultural shifts, the left brain has gradually taken over. It's kind of staged a sort of coup in Western society, and it's like a Frankenstein. It's trying to run the world. And this is really obvious in our economy, obviously, in the way we deal with nature, and it is really obvious in our school system. So, because the left brain believes in technocratic control, it believes in measurement, manipulation of nature and people. So modern schooling divides the day into uniform chunks of time. It divides children by numeric age. It divides knowledge into disconnected, quantifiable learning goals and objectives. So everything is measured and weighed and counted. And this spirit of objectification, of treating the living as if it were non-living, extends to our children as well. So they are quantified, numbered, and ranked. They are diminished from the I-thou of true relationship to the I-it of the standardized test score. So a team of researchers designed this experiment. I don't even want to know how they did this, but they had a way of sort of deactivating one hemisphere at a time. That in itself is kind of frightening. But so they took a group of experimental subjects and they inactivated the right side of their brain. So they're just operating out of the left side. And they gave them a syllogism and asked them if the conclusion was correct. So the syllogism would be something like this. Premise 1, all monkeys climb trees. Premise 2, the rabbit is a monkey. Conclusion, therefore rabbits climb trees. So the person with only the left brain activated would say, well, it sounds like that's true. I guess rabbits climb trees. Because it was internally logical. They didn't see the false premise and, the way that it was disconnected from the world. So the exact same person with only the same person with the right hemisphere activated would look at this syllogism and just go, this is ridiculous. Monkeys, rabbits aren't monkeys. This is stupid. I'm not going to answer this question. So, and how many of you have a kid in school who's more like that second category of person? Yeah, exactly. So what they're finding is that the right brain, because it is grounded in reality and sense perception and connection, the right brain functions, and McGilchrist gives us a very technical term for this. It functions as our bullshit detector. And the person operating out of the left brain will just be circling within an abstract system of their own thought that is completely unhinged from reality, but they will give you answers very authoritatively, with no doubt or hesitation, based on these abstract systems of their own creation. So, what does that remind you of? A Harvard economist. So he was, telling us that derivatives are distributing risk across the economy and, therefore stabilizing the economy, or endless economic growth is possible because, the free markets will take care of everything. And, they know this because they got A's in calculus and computer science and econometrics, and they've run the computer models. So, and these guys at Harvard, Harvard just lost a third of its endowment because they didn't see a major economic meltdown coming when it was staring them in the face. So, it would be funny if it weren't so dangerous, because this is what we're educating our kids to do. This is the skill that gets you to the peak of academia. Gets you a tenured chair in the Ivy Leagues. And this is the kind of standard that all of our children are being measured against and, found lacking when they just say, what, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to answer this question. So the poet Rabindranath Tagore once said, "I was not a creation of the schoolmaster. The Government Board of Education was not consulted when I took birth in the world." So our children were not created to one standard, and they cannot be measured by one standard. They are not human resources to be numbered and ranked and fed into the global economy or labeled as failures and discarded. And they fight the mechanical control of their minds like a horse fights the saddle, with 1,000 strategies of resistance, inattention, disengagement, forgetting. And no matter how much we diagnose and drug them, the most spirited among them are going to continue to fight it, but they need us to come over to their side. So they are begging us to see them with the right side of our brains, to see them not as an it, but as a thou. And teachers and parents and students are all feeling this, but within this structure, they feel powerless to do anything about it. But if we're going to resist the powers that are controlling our world, we need to resist their control of our children. We need to reactivate our bullshit detectors. We need to occupy our brains.